Okay, so I just want to give a quick overview of the division of labor, really, really fast. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here. We did talk about this a bit in class, but we didn't go into a ton of depth, so I just want to give you a quick overview right now. I'm guessing a lot of you are fairly familiar with this idea anyway, but if not, that's fine. But all we're talking about here with the division of labor is what's a discussion really of the ways that we produce things now and the ways that we produce things really since the rise of capitalism and the rise of factories and all those things we talked about earlier, as compared to how people produced items for themselves earlier and throughout the overwhelming majority of human history. So if we take a look at this slide, it just says home production. Not everything was necessarily produced at home. You have craftsmen producing things as well, but I just want to give the example of producing at home. So here we have just two images of women who are sewing and they're working at home. So one on the left, the woman is sitting there at her loom, weaving something, a shirt or some other kind of textile, while a kid plays in the corner. And to the right, we see another woman working while a kid or a young woman is cooking, and another woman's doing something that I have no idea what it is. Couldn't even guess what she's doing. But anyway, so what's happening in both these pictures is the woman is producing clothing for her family, and this would have been a family affair, so it wouldn't necessarily have been just her sewing. She wouldn't necessarily have been the only one contributing here, but other people could have gotten involved as well, and likely did. But what's important is that when she's producing clothes or shirts, dresses, whatever it is, they're producing the entire product at home from start to finish, so weaving the cloth, putting it together. It's a very slow, labor-intensive process. We can think about other types of ways of producing things that humanity engaged in prior to capitalism as well. Things like, if you're a medieval blacksmith, you would produce metal goods and you would produce them from start to finish. So if you're making nails, or you're making horseshoes, or you're making a wagon wheel, or whatever, you make that item from start to finish. So it's very labor intensive, very slow, it's highly skilled, so it takes a lot of training and learning in order to make that happen. We don't make things like that anymore, at least not too often. Now we rely heavily on assembly lines and machine labor. So both of these images, one is modern and one is not so modern, but they're both capitalist images. So we have women, primarily or exclusively women on the left. On the right, there are men working as well, but in both cases, we see large numbers of people working at machines to produce clothing. Now, in both cases, you really can't make this out clearly in these images, but the process is broken down into steps. So if you are working on one of these assembly lines, you aren't going to make the entire article of clothing from start to finish. You might make just one small part of it. So it might be your job to sew the arms on to the shirt, or it might be your job to put some of the buttons on or something. So in both of these cases, we can see there's not tons of technology. There's quite a few machines here, but there's also a lot of human labor. People are working the machines. If we looked at something like a car factory, we would see that robots were doing most of the work, with humans really taking the back there and not really doing quite as much. But so it's all really broken down. With, in the case of textiles, again, people doing the work. But in these types of factories, there would be people doing other things too. So, for instance, when you're sewing, there's going to be little extra pieces of string that are left just from the threads, and so it would be some people's job. This is a job. Literally, people do this. They spend their entire day just going over the individual articles of clothing, just clipping off tiny pieces of string, or making sure all the rivets are in place, or whatever it is. But the key point here is the labor is really, really broken out into component parts. Ultimately, what this does is it allows us to produce a lot more stuff a lot faster, oftentimes a lot higher quality, and a lot cheaper. So we talked earlier about commodities and the source of exchange value. We discussed how when the amount of labor that goes into a product or a commodity decreases, its exchange value also goes down. So if we have a factory producing cars with there might be thousands of people working in the factory, but each person's individual labor is only contributing a little bit to each car, and robots and other kinds of technology have really taken over. There's going to be significantly less labor going into each car than there would be if the cars were made by hand, and that's why cars are a lot cheaper than they would be if people made them by hand. Same thing with shirts. Right now you can go into stores like H&M or Forever 21 or these fast fashion stores, and they have these systems in place. Part of them are physical technology in terms of machines, but they also have other sorts of technology as well, like logistics and things like that, where they can produce massive number of clothes really, really quickly for really, really cheaply, and we gain the benefit of that. Now, one of the consequences of this, according to Marx and according to others, is that this type of labor, unlike previous labor, like home production, or if you're a medieval blacksmith or whatever, where you're highly skilled, when you're working an assembly line, you are not highly skilled. For instance, if your job is to clip thread, it doesn't take a lot of skill to clip thread. If your job is to sew a shirt sleeve onto a shirt, that's not incredibly highly skilled. Yeah, there's a skill that you need there, but it's not something that you really have to be trained deeply with. So anyway, that's, long story short, the assembly line, or the division of labor, is the breaking down of labor into parts, each person contributing one very small part to the end product, with the benefit of producing large numbers of things at less cost and with less time, but with the consequence of reducing the amount of human labor that's needed. And that's going to become really important when we get to things like exploitation and alienation. And that is it.